Good evening and welcome to this regular session of the Lakeville Area Schools Board of Education. This meeting is officially called to order. Please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Board members in attendance tonight include Director Kelleher, Director Shinley, Director Lind, Chair Baker, Director Carly Anderson, Director David Anderson, and Director Thompson. The board is joined by members of the Executive Cabinet, Bill Holmgren, Dr. Emily McDonald, Brenda Albrecht, Dave Haveman, and also by Superintendent Dr. Doug Van Zyl. So we'll go ahead and start with good news. Superintendent.
All right, thank you and good evening. Several good items for us this evening. Student of the Month. Lakeville Area Schools has a Student of the Month recognition program that highlights an elementary, middle school, and high school student each month. Students are nominated by staff members. We're excited to announce December Student of the Month, Elias Galokia. No, I just messed that up. Galokia is how you say his last name. Eastview Elementary, Abel Edwards, and 8th grade middle school student, Holly Driscoll. So congratulations to those students. If you haven't had the opportunity, you can go online, take a look at their nomination, and you see their pictures as well. We also have our staff members of the month. Lakeville Area Schools has a monthly staff recognition program that highlights staff nominated by other employees. December staff members of the month were Patricia Pitka, a paraprofessional at Christina Huddleston Elementary, and Tanya Anderson, kitchen manager at Lakeville South. And again, if you have the opportunity, you can go online and see that. I have the opportunity to go around and recognize all these folks, and so it's a great opportunity to be able to do that, and it's pretty fun. You see some tears, you see some laughter, you see some families that come in, so it is a great opportunity for us. We also want to congratulate our Blazing Cats adaptive soccer team for earning the state championship title for a third year in a row. So big congratulations to them. They won the 2023 Adaptive Soccer CI Tournament Championship game on Saturday, November 18th. In addition to earning the state championship title, the state championship game was the Blazing Cats' 30th consecutive game, undefeated in the past 3 soccer seasons. So huge congratulations and shout out to them. Also, Lakeville Area School is proud to have 2 staff members be named to the Education Minnesota Lakeville EML Educators of Excellence, Dr. Matthew Wonkin and Gina Meyerhofer. They're now eligible candidates for the 2024 Minnesota Teacher of the Year. Among candidates from across the state who are nominated by their colleagues and named by the Education Minnesota. So congratulations to them. Wonkin is a band director at Lakeville North, and Meyerhofer teaches A+ at Christina Huddleston. So big shout out to them. We have one other item that we want to share is we have a new show and tell. This is our middle schoolers where they take the mic. In the latest episode of Show and Tell, Darnell, an 8th grader at McGuire Middle School, interviews his peers and school staff to give us a behind-the-scenes peek at what's going on in our middle school. So it may take a second to upload, and as soon as it's ready, we will take a look.
Hi, my name is Darnell, and this is Show and Tell. We're going to ask people to show us something or tell us something. Come on, let's go. So right now we're in the school lunchroom, and we're here with Lori. Lori, what would you say is your favorite school lunch?
I love the Dunker Days.
Lori, can you please show us something around the lunchroom?
I can show you something cool about the lunchroom. Let's go in the dish room.
I never knew that cleaning school dishes was a lot of work, but I'm really grateful that I know now. Let's see who we can find now. Hi, can we ask you some questions?
Sure.
What's your favorite thing to learn about?
Like all the different countries and everything around the world and global studies.
Emlyn, what would you say is the most recent thing that you learned recently?
I learned every country in Asia.
Algebra is really hard. Really, really hard. Miss Weber, what's your favorite part of your day?
My first favorite part is when my 8th grade students come down and visit me. And my second favorite part is getting to do dream time with my students where they read for 10 minutes at the beginning of class. And they love it too, right? Yes. That was not enthusiastic. We love it too, right? Yes.
What projects are you proud of?
My Earth, Sun, and Moon project. Me and my friends, we put in a lot of work. We filmed, we got it done, and then we decided to do something fun, so we added bloopers.
How long did that project take you?
It took like 2 days.
Wow. Easton, can you show me something that's cool about the school?
There's a big, cool library that has a lot of books in it.
My favorite part of the school is the new gyms.
Do you play any sports?
Yeah, I do wrestling and track and field.
Oakley, what is your best wrestling move that you're most proud of?
That's to say the headlock.
What's a headlock again?
Around the head.
Uh-oh.
Grab the
Uh-oh.
step in front and throw. But I won't do that then.
Miss Irvin, what's your favorite part about teaching choir?
I love that we get to do more than just sing, where we really learn about who we are, we create a community, and then learn also how music plays a part in our lives and how that connects us as humans.
That's amazing. Miss Hogland, we're on our way. Miss Hogland, can we ask you some questions?
Absolutely. How are you doing now?
I'm good, you?
Good.
Can you show us something cool about your office?
Some of my smaller classrooms actually made me flowers. I love them.
Miss Weber, what is your secret talent?
Hold on, I don't know if it's reading a lot of books. Let me think of something more interesting. My secret talent. What's my secret talent?
I mean, I can say like you get like a lot of people to say like what they really don't want to say sometimes. But like,
What do you mean?
But like, what I mean by that is like, if someone's having a bad day and they don't want to speak about it, like you have like this energy around you that like makes them like feel like they can tell you.
That's a great talent.
Miss Hogland, may I please have a piece of candy?
You may. And there you go, sir.
Thank you so much. This was show and tell. Easton, go back to class now, please.
Okay.
Go.
That's our good news for this evening.
Thank you so much. I love watching the show and tell videos. It's my favorite. So, for board communications tonight, we'll start with our stakeholders session. We had one stakeholders session this evening where we had a participant, and so I'll turn that over to Director Carly Anderson so she can give us a short synopsis of that.
Yes, a few of us were there tonight to meet with a community member who had some concerns about the recent sale of the land near Kenwood. So expressed some concerns and then asked questions about the process and gave us some feedback.
Great, thanks for sharing. The school board has also recently started 2 committees. One of those is the Public Engagement Committee, and the other one is a policy subcommittee. So we'll ask board members on those 2 committees to share short updates because both of those committees have met so far this week. So Director Lind, do you want to share about the Public Engagement Committee?
Sure. Director or Chair Baker and myself and Director Anderson, Carly Anderson, met on December 4th, where we talked about ways that the board could be more engaged with the public. And we talked about different areas like community groups we could be involved in. And someone mentioned the January 27th Lions Day of Volunteering, Volunteer Day, where we could come and meet the public on a different grounds. In other words, not having the public coming here, we're going out to visit with the public. And we also talked about community forums. Instead of having a staff development day or once a month, we might use one of those days, Tuesdays, for a community forum where we meet with different groups. We could meet with student groups, the special education groups, the Somalia community, the retired community, those kinds of things, and we would The purpose would be depending on the audience. It wouldn't be a canned presentation or anything like that. We would try to find out what their needs are and try to talk with them about it.
You said Staff Development Day, and I think you meant our board.
I meant a Professional Development Day
Clear.
for the board.
Yeah.
Excuse me. That's usually a second Tuesday of the month.
Once
We
a principal, always a principal.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's my little cross to bear, I guess. Thanks. And then we talked about a little bit about how we're going to, what are we going to use for metrics to find out if we're being successful in doing this. And that's still something we're working on, and I'm sure we'll cover that with our next meeting. But that's basically it. And as a Lion, I like to plug the Community Day of Volunteering if anybody's interested in January 27th at the Heritage Center, 9 to noon. So, thank you.
Thank you, Director Lind. Director Thompson, do you want to share about the policy committee?
Yeah, so the subcommittee met with Director Shinley, Director Keller, Monday the 4th. We looked at the data of our policies, established the workflow, created a kind of a roadmap of how we would review these policies and cadence. Just a quick fun fact on the data, we've got about 125 school board policies that provide direction and guidance for the administration on how our schools ought to operate. About 24% of them have been reviewed over the past 3 years. About 75% are 3 years and older, and about 64% are 6 years and older. And so this is a really good opportunity for us to make sure that we are in sync and up to date with our policies. And so, again, as a school board entity, that is our primary charge, to make sure that we review policies and update them accordingly. Good news is that about 31 of them have been reviewed this year. So the administration has reviewed our policies from a statutory point of view, and the board has approved them. The next step that we'd like to do as a school board is to put a Lakeview lens on it, making sure that are there things that we want to make updates to, what our other community members are doing that are beyond legal rules, and making sure that we've got the right point of view and our community and stakeholders have a voice in the process. So the workflow is pretty simple. We'll take a look at it, and then as we are in alignment and sync, we'll move it forward to a working session for the regular board to review. And if they are in alignment to it, then we'll bring it to a regular session and then let the entire community see and also have input on it before we vote. Roadmap-wise, we'll take a look at the 100 and 200 series going into Q1 of next year. Cadence-wise, we're going to meet every 2 weeks. And so for those who are super jazzed about policies, you can bring some popcorn at 6:30 until 8. It should be exciting. Our goal is to provide as much transparency as we can in this policy process because, again, this is our school and our community, and we'll want to make sure that we get feedback along the way. Thank you.
And just for clarification, on the policy committee, we have Director Thompson, Director Shinley, and Director Kelleher.
Yes.
All right, so as we have no additions on the agenda tonight, I'll ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
We have a motion by Director Lind. Do we have a second? Second by Director David Anderson. Any discussion on the agenda? Hearing none, we'll go to a vote. All in favor to approve the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Do we have any items that board members would like to remove from the consent agenda for further discussion? Director Thompson?
I would like to pull item H, please. Item H.
All right, so you're removing item H, which is the Hasse naming agreement, for further discussion. Is that correct?
Correct.
Are there any other items that board members would like to pull from the consent agenda for further discussion? Okay. Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda minus item H? Any motion for that?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Director David Anderson. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Director Lind. Any further discussion on the consent agenda? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. So now we'll move on to the discussion of the item that Director Thompson asked to remove, which is item H, the Hasse naming agreement. Director Thompson, why don't you go ahead and ask your questions
Yeah,
on
so
that?
I'm going to pull this out because I want to make sure that there is acknowledgement for this particular item. And so for those that may have read the agenda and for those who have not, the Hasse name, it has been asked to continue on in our Lakeville arenas, and there was a tremendous, generous donation that was associated with that. So a $250,000 donation was provided, and we are going to continue on the 10-year arrangement of having that name on our school for consistency, for tradition, and so forth. This is a 20-year arrangement, and so I just want to make sure there is an acknowledgement. We talk about it before just approving it and making sure. So that'd be my point of view. I know that there's other aspects that I think as a board we need to resolve on a separate issue, but in regards to this tremendous generosity, I want to acknowledge that.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments on this item? All right. So do I have a motion to approve item H, the Hasse naming agreement?
So moved.
We have a motion by Director Shinley. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Director Carly Anderson. Any further discussion on this item? Okay, we'll go ahead and put it to a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. So we have no reports tonight, but we do have reports with recommended actions. This is our truth and taxation hearing part, so we'll go ahead and ask Bill Holmgren to come forward.
Madam Chair. Sorry about that. Let's move over. Here we go. Madam Chair, Directors of the School Board, Superintendent Van Zyl. Yes, tonight we are going to do our tax hearing and go through the details of our levy for pay 24. Let's see where I need to go here. Whoops, sorry about that. Okay. As part of the Minnesota State law requirements when it comes to school levies, we have to hold a public meeting. And it has to happen between November 25th and December 28th. And it has to be after 6 p.m., which we are doing this evening. It has to be maybe part of a regular scheduled meeting. And we must allow for some public comment after that presentation. And then we may adopt the final levy at this same meeting. Two things we have to talk about, again, is our current year budget. And then, of course, the detail of the property tax levy. So first, we're going to talk a little bit of background about school funding, then we'll go into the budget, and then into the levy, and then we'll take some time for public comment. The Minnesota legislature sets funding for Minnesota public schools. They have to put together a uniform system of public schools, and the legislature shall make provisions by taxation or otherwise. I think it's very important to understand that the state sets all the formulas which determine revenue for the school district. Most revenue is based upon per pupil, which we talked about. Our pupils generate the funding that we use each year. The state also sets all tax policy for local school districts. And of course, the state sets the maximum authorized property tax levy. The state also authorizes school board to submit referendums and operating and capital needs to voters for approval, which is something we did just last month. By passing the one question, we did put a new operating levy into our levy. I think I just want to touch again on basic general education. The formula lags inflation has since, well, our baseline is back in the 2002-2003 school year. This past year, we did see an increase. In the current year right now, we saw a 4% increase from the state of Minnesota in our formula allowance. This is actually a big increase compared to what we've got for many, many years. And we have 2% going into next fiscal year. So our new pupil allowance for 25, there is at 72.81. In order to keep up with inflation, we'd have another $1,356. That's actually $18 million when you put it to what we would receive here at Lakeville. Here's just another look. You see in that orange line way off to the right in 24, you see a little push up there, that 4%. It's very small, but you can see what our actual cost and inflation, what's been happening on that blue line. Of course, underfunding of special education is really another big issue that we have. In fiscal year 22, across the state of Minnesota, special education was underfunded by $712 million. Even now with the increased funding that we've received, the state is still short over $400 million on a statewide basis. Of course, primary options to bridge this funding gap is to cut regular programmings or, of course, increase referendum or operating referendums. Of course, most schools have done both, and of course, we have done that. When we see a change in our tax levy, it doesn't necessarily mean there's a change in the budget. Again, the state determines the formulas where we get our funds from. Some increases in tax levies are revenue neutral. Lots of times we'll get either new levy or new aid, and then it switches around and it takes it away on the other side. Our expenditure budget is limited, of course, by the state revenue that we receive, because we only spend what we have. So again, an increase in school taxes does not always correlate to an increase in our budget. And what actually be a couple small pieces we'll talk about in a minute on that. We also, difference in levy cycles, just want everyone to be aware. The city of county, they run on a calendar basis. We are on a fiscal basis. So our next fiscal year starts next July. So the dollars that we're talking about this evening are actually for next year. It's not for the year that we're in, it's for our next fiscal year. And I think another thing to mention here, it's very important. The school district itself is the only entity, a taxing authority entity, that has to go to the public to ask for funding, where the city or the county don't have to do that. They can set their rate to fill the budget that they need. Okay, when we talk about our budget, we do fund accounting. Okay, well, any city or county or school district does this. So general fund, we've talked about general fund many, many times. That's where by far the majority of the dollars run through. But our food service sits in a separate fund. It has to fund itself along with community service. Building construction, all the funds that we do for all of our bonding for LTFM, any bonding we do for any type of school building runs through our building construction fund. Debt service, we just levy dollars directly to pay for the bonds that we need to make payments on, and it only goes through that fund. Our trust fund is really scholarships for our students, and then our internal service fund is our insurance programs. We're self-funded, both health and in dental, and it's important to know that any funds in food service on down the list cannot be used to help the general fund, but the general fund can be used to help those other funds. Here's a snapshot. Numbers get a little small, but a snapshot of our current budget. If you look in the blue area, you see on the first line, and that's our general fund. You can see now that our revenue is they're estimated or budgeted to be at almost $197 million. Of course, this is the biggest budget that we've had here, with expenditures at 194. So an increase, looking at our fund balance, going up $3.4 million. Our food service fund is a very healthy fund. A lot less volume goes through there, of about $7.5 million. We have a fund balance there of over $3 million. This is very close to the limit that we've had in the past. That limit's been changed over the last few years because of the increased funding in food service, so we don't have to worry about spending that down at this point in time. But we're in good shape, being able to put together a lot of equipment needs that we've needed, and we've actually been able to use this for part of the funding for the new building in our kitchens. So all the equipment in our new kitchen, in our new building, has come out of the food service fund.
Bill, can I just ask a quick question for clarification, especially with the general fund? So do you have you pretty much got what the unfunded mandates that were given to us from the last legislative session? Is that mostly calculated into here now, or is some of it still being figured out?
Well, what we've put some dollars in there set aside for those. We don't have all the details of our unfunded mandates. The three big ones, of course, is the READ Act.
Right.
We don't know what all the expenditures are going to be.
Okay.
In that. We know that even though the state of Minnesota has put some money aside for the unemployment piece,
right,
we're going to be okay in this first year. But in the future, we are not. When that money runs out, we're going to have to pay that unemployment.
So we're doing our best guessing and estimating, but we don't have all the final details
That's
of
right.
those costs. Okay.
And we'll certainly bring, as we get details, we will bring those forward. We will be bringing a revised budget to you in January.
Thank you.
Okay, building construction, again, that It's expected to go down more than we're bringing in just because we're spending the money on the new building. Our debt service, again, that's exactly what we need to spend to make those payments. When we look at the trust fund for our scholarships, this money that's there is money that's been deposited by our community, and it stays there, and only the interest we receive goes into scholarship. So that base amount, that $860,000 stays there to be used in future years. Internal service, again, this is growing now. There's a lot of money that runs through our health insurance. You can see the volume there of $31.5 million. To take it just kind of a reference look at our budget, there we go. You can see that the general fund by far is our largest fund at almost 80% of our total dollars that we run through the school district. Our food service is about 8, community service about 9. And our building construction running at $12 million this year. Debt service at $20 million. So it just gives you a kind of a good look at what's happening with our budget, the different components. When you focus in just on the general fund revenue piece, you can see that most of the money comes from the state of Minnesota in the referendum. I'm sorry, not the referendum, but in our formula allowance. And when you go over to the local side, that's where our taxes are at. And about $50 million of that local number is our tax levy. We move over to the expenditures in the general fund. Look at the object side. So you can see our salaries and wages there at over $100 million now, with our benefits coming in with almost $46 million. So by far, the majority of the dollars that we spend are on our employees. Purchase services, some big numbers there too, but for an example, just all our transportation runs through there, and that's over $10 million a year all by itself. So this gives you a snapshot of our object side. We move over to the program side. You see, of course, regular instruction, vocational, special education is where most of the dollars are being spent, programming for our students. And then, of course, we got a lot of instructional support services. And that's our deans and social workers and so forth. When you look at our pupil support services, they're still at a pretty big number. But again, 10 million of that is transportation. We move over to the property tax levy. We're going to quickly talk about the determination of the levy. Compare last year to the new year next year coming up. And then really talk about some of the reasons, especially some of our areas, we have some bigger changes. And then talk a little bit about the impact on our taxpayers. Every owner of taxable property pays property taxes to different jurisdictions, like the county, city, township, so forth, school district, whichever they're located in. So each taxing jurisdiction, of course, sets their own tax levy, and it's based on limits set by state law. The county, of course, sends the bills, collects the taxes from property owners, and then distributes it back to us. This should look a little familiar, just a little bit of a sample, but you see everybody that owns property will get their statement in the mail from the county between November 11th and the 24th. And of course, this shows last year's taxes and the taxes for the following year by taxing jurisdiction, so everybody can see what's happening. And on the school district side, you'll see that we have a voter-approved portion and then an other portion. Of course, voter-approved is pretty straightforward. It's anything voter-approved. Everything else is all the other pieces that we are going to be talking about. Each school district may levy taxes over 40 different categories. Now, of course, we don't have 40 here, but we do have 27. So we have a pretty long list of different revenue streams that run through the school district. Of course, the maximum levy amounts are calculated by the Minnesota Department of Ed, but state law regulates that, or voter approval, what we've asked for. There's 6 main steps in the process. We'll look at that here in a second. But the school district really only has control over one of those steps, and really not much control there either. The city or county assessor, though, they determine the value on everybody's market value on their particular parcel of property. And the legislature sets all the formulas for tax capacity of our school district on their limits. And of course, the county auditor then calculates the tax capacity on each parcel, so we know what each parcel pays in tax. Minnesota Department of Education calculates our limits. We get a big booklet, about 50 pages long, that I dig through. And then the school board does the adopting of the actual levy a preliminary levy in September, and then, of course, a final certification here in December. And then, of course, the county auditor divides all that up, and they collect it for us. A little bit just on the approval of it. We just talked about it briefly. September 8th of each year, that's when we get the information from the MDE on what our limits are. We work on that, work with the MDE for a few weeks there to make sure these numbers are correct. And then we bring it to the school board at the end of September, our last meeting in September. And of course, mid-November, the property tax statements go out to our property owners. And then tonight, we'll have a hearing talking about the detail of our levy and then take action on it. Our proposed payable 2024 tax levy is an increase from 23 of a little over $6 million or 8.8%. And we're going to go through now the changes. It gets a little small here, but I want you to focus on line 4 for just a second. These are our operating referendum dollars. And when we look at this, there's 3 components that make this increase of 2.7. Of course, the question we just passed with the community, that was $1.3 million of that. That's the new question put in there. The other is we continue to see increased enrollment. So that's built into here. And of course, we have a inflation factor on our questions. So that's the other factor that's pushing a little increase here. You see under equity revenue, this is a formula that allows school districts across the state of Minnesota that don't have operating levies to actually have a small piece of some funds that they can levy for, a choice of their own. But because we passed a new one, our total is a little bit higher, and so we actually lose a little bit here, that $75,000. So that first portion, 1 through 4, that's all operating levy portions. That local optional revenue, this is operating levies we have had in the past, but the state has determined that everybody can levy that $724. So ours rolls into that, which will remain there forever. But anyway, that top portion is a discretionary amount of our tax levy that's available for programming for our students. We move on to the next area. You see under assigned components, this is all based on net tax capacity. Achievement and integration grant, about 1/3 of those dollars are here in our levy. The other 2/3 come directly from the state of Minnesota in the form of aid. Our Safe Schools levy, this is based on the number of students that we have, and this is used for our SRO officers, chemical awareness, some security items. When you see District 917 listed there, they're our intermediate district that we work with. They are not allowed, or they don't have any levy authority, so all the member districts levy dollars for their Safe Schools levy, and then we forward those dollars to them. Our vocational dollars, we get some funds. There's a formula. Again, we're going to get the same amount as we did the year before. Our reemployment, these are actual dollars that we spend in unemployment. You see that went way down. During COVID, we had a pretty large numbers coming through, so that's down over 100,000. Our Q-Comp, the program that we have with mini staff development with our teaching staff, you can see there it's approximately the exact same number there, about $1.1 million. Again, there's an aid component to this, about 2/3. So that total value is around $3 million. OPEB, other post-employment benefits. These are dollars that are spent directly on our retirees in severance and in health insurance payments when they're first gone from employment here. Again, this dollar comes from an actuarial study that we do, and then at the end of the year, if we don't spend all those dollars, we actually give those dollars back. That's estimated at $1.6 million for next year. Our lease levy. Lease levy are buildings that we use for educational purposes that we do not own, and we have to pay levy on it. So we levy funds to make those payments. That includes the additions to our elementary schools that we put on in the last few years onto the 5 buildings. Again, lease levy for District 917 runs the same way. We levy those dollars for them. They do not own the buildings that they use. So we help them make those lease payments on those buildings. Moving to the last piece, their assigned components capital. It's also spread on net tax capacity. But our operating capital, we do get an aid portion here. It's about half and half. You can see here moving up a little bit. That's a formula based on the number, the square footage of our buildings and the age of our buildings, and of course how many students that we have. LTFM, this is the general fund portion. About a third of the dollars we do on a pay-as-you-go levy for LTFM projects. You'll see here that's at $6.8 million. And then the capital projects levy. This is something we had gone to voters for. This funds our technology devices. It also funds our staff, our STEM program when it comes to the equipment cost and some security pieces. This is the growth that you're seeing there is the net tax capacity across our district growing because the tax rate is the same from year to year to year. Moving on to community service fund. You see small increases here. This is based on the growth or on the actual population of our district, the number of people. We get so many dollars per capita in our district, and it's the same for our youth service and after-school programming. Early childhood, you see a small decrease here. That's something we talked about earlier. Just because there's less here doesn't mean they have a smaller budget. This fluctuates on a yearly basis. In early childhood, the state of Minnesota changes that formula on a regular basis. But overall, this is not, the overall dollars for that program is not down. A home visit and disabled adults, these are programs run through the community ed that are just reimbursement based. So these are the dollars we spent and we're just getting the dollars back. School age care. This is before and after school programming for our students. We're able to levy for the special education portion of these students. So some of the dollars they need to support these students before and after school are here. You see that next line, the prior year adjustments, you see a relatively large negative number there of 120,000. This is still coming back from the pandemic era where we had a lot less students being supported in this way. So we did not spend $566,000. So these dollars are going back to our community as a negative adjustment. Debt service. Again, these dollars come directly just to pay the bond payments. The state of Minnesota allows us to levy 105% of whatever our bond payments are. We do that on a yearly basis. That way, if someone doesn't pay their taxes or we have a group of people who don't pay their taxes, we still have enough funds to make our bond payments. And, of course, if we don't need those, then we give them back. And you'll see that under reduction for debt service, number 3, you'll see that $1.2 million is actually going back to the taxpayer because we didn't need those funds to make those payments. Another thing I want to point out, you see under debt service, the basic levy portion last year was $17.5 million. This year's 3.7, and vice versa. LTFM last year was 3.5, and now we're at 18. When we look at building our debt plan, when we do bond sales, we look at trying to keep that tax rate flat. So we have some areas where the payments are going down, and then we fill it with a different type. So that's what you're seeing here. Our bond payments for next year, we have more payments going back to LTFM bonds than we do our regular general obligation bonds. So you see the total is relatively close to the same. But when you look at your tax statement, you see the voter approved and the other are switched. And it looks kind of funny when you first look at it, wondering why we have this huge increase in our other. Well, this is why, because we're switching it and keeping these payments the same.
Hey, can you provide additional clarity on the debt service? So again, this is loans that we've taken out. If the general budget is $195 million and we're expected to spend about $20 million on payments back, so when you say you try to keep it flat, is it at 10% that you're trying to keep it flat at? So when our general fund increases, that debt service will increase by 10% as well? Or are you looking at trying to cap it at $20 million and that's it?
We're looking at that 20 million in debt service. So again, these dollars are not in the general fund; they're in Fund 7 in our debt service fund.
Yep.
as we build those payments, we also look at the net tax capacity and how that's growing over the years. So those payments will grow over the years because the net tax capacity grows. So the tax rate remains the same. So when we look at anybody's particular tax, the actual amount that you pay should be about the same. Because we have, if you look around and see the houses being built here, there's more people paying tax next year than there were last year. So that's where that extra $800,000 gets covered, is by the new building that's taking place.
Okay. I don't think I didn't follow that. So I'll take this separately offline. Thank you.
I want to just talk about now, again, a couple of pieces that we have see some larger increases in our levy. Of course, here, the general fund, the voter-approved operating referendum is $2.7 million. There's really three components that are generating these dollars. Number one is the new question we just passed last month with a $100 per pupil increase, which is generating $1.3 million. So 1.3 of that 2.7 is directly from passing that question. The other two are the inflation factors that we have built into our operating levies. We're seeing a little over 2% this going into this year, but from adjustments from years before, we had some larger ones. So that's a little bit of a catch-up. And then, of course, we have new students that are coming forward. So that's built into here. So those three components are what's driving that $2.7 million increase in our levy for next year. When we look at the local optional revenue, which we touched on briefly, again, this $888,000 is entirely based on the number of students, our increase in students going into next year. Okay, and then our capital projects referendum. Again, that's the next net tax capacity and how it's growing, because that tax rate for our capital projects levy stays the same. So as the net tax capacity goes up, it's the same rate against that net tax capacity. That's why you're seeing an increase here, 749. And this all drives into our technology and STEM programs. And here we're just talking about, you'll see a change of a negative almost $14 million in the voter approved, and an increase of 14.6 in the LTFM. Again, we're looking at trying to make these payments as flat as possible, so we're not seeing any type of big increase or decrease when it comes to our taxpayers going forward. Okay. I just want to touch on a couple pieces here. There's factors that raise people's taxes more than just the dollars that we're bringing forward, and it's really most of it's to do with individual property valuation. I've had a few calls this year where we have some taxpayers that have very large changes in their valuation on their homes or on their property, and they're wondering why their taxes went up so much. And that is why most of like our district office, I usually go around and how much did your valuation change? So I get kind of an idea of what's happened. And most people's valuations only change in 3-5%. So when we see people with big changes of 25-30%, then they're seeing a bigger tax. Of course, the other thing that affects it is the total property change in the whole district. And in our case, most of the time that's helping most of our taxpayers because our net tax capacity is growing. We have more people paying tax, so it helps keep flat. Usually the percentage we bring forward, in this case, is going to be 8.8%. What the average person pays on their property tax is less than that. Mm-hmm. But of course, everybody's different, so I can't give you an exact number of what that is. Okay, and of course, state funding formulas change, local needs change, and so forth. So those are another factors that kind of affect that. So again,
can I just add something to that? So you mentioned it a couple slides earlier about the 14 million down in voter approved, because some of those 20-year bonds or whatever they are now coming to completion and expiring.
For an example, we're getting close to the end of the bonds that we had on South High School.
South.
We're getting right down to the end, and at the end, those payments tapered off.
Yeah.
So that's what's happening. They're tapering off, and then we're paying up the LTFM to get those paid off.
Yeah.
But so that our tax rate's the same.
And so like in our work session that we talked about, we had a bar chart that showed how we are making decisions to land in the spaces where property taxes are getting lowered so that we are keeping things level rather than having constant increases.
Yeah. Most of the time when we bring information forward to the board each year, the debt service portion is going to be very flat. We
Yep.
work very hard at making sure that that's pretty flat. The increases we're seeing are on the operating levies because of the inflation factor and because our district's growing. Those are the two big things pushing these dollars up. So, looks like I have some pumpkin pie. I don't know if anybody likes that at Christmas time, but just again, as the market value increases on somebody's particular property, you're going to pay a bigger slice than if it went down. Okay. Here's just a quick example. We have two houses here. Each of them are valued at $100,000, and we have $500 of levy for the school district. Well, that gets split. They're the same value of that house, $250 each. If we have valuation change, see the first house is moving up $10,000 to $110,000. The blue house is moving to $125,000. So what's happening is that blue house, of course, went up larger, so they have a bigger piece of that pie, so to speak. So the 500 is the same. The school district doesn't get more dollars when that happens. But as the valuation changes on houses, that's how some people are getting bigger increases than others. Now I'm going to go through some examples here just so
Hey,
you
Bill.
can... Oh, go ahead.
Director Thompson has a
Can
question.
you go back to that previous slide? So I just want to make sure that I understand this as well. So if the total levy is $500, and obviously the two values of the property changes and it flips, when you add a third house then into the market, then what does that do to each individual's homes?
Well, in this situation, it's going to work the same. We get back up. Let's say we have three homes at $100,000, and we have 500, right? It'd be split evenly. But as those values change, the higher value house is going to pay more tax. But in the school side, we're still only going to collect the $500.
We only collect the $500.
Got it. So as our community continues to expand and add more houses, then ideally the tax dollar amount for that the individual homeowner ought to be paying ideally should go lower. Obviously, there's more factors involved.
And we'll look at that in a second.
Yep.
But it's true. If your house isn't changing in value, your taxes aren't going up.
Yep.
Okay, and we'll show that here. In the last few years, the average house did increase about 38%. I mean, we've had some big numbers over the last 4 years. But we're going to look at a couple examples here of property tax in just the city of Lakeville. So it's not our whole district. But if we look, I apologize, these numbers are a little small. Right now, our mean on houses in Lakeville are $460,000. And you see that about halfway down the page. And you can see this is showing if there wasn't any type of change at all to their valuation. So we're going from $2,800 back in 21, and we get to 23, it's only 2,500. So it actually went down if your value of your house didn't change. And of course, we're adding on 24 here on the right-hand side. And even with adding the new approved referendum, the taxes in 24 would be lower than they were back in 21.
And that's only the school.
That's only the school. So it doesn't take
I
into
want to move to Lakeville if that's
it doesn't take into consider the county or the city. This is only talking about the school portion of your taxes. So here's just a little bit another look, a little more. You can see it a little better. But first one's there, it's at 350. If you stayed the same, you're going from 21 back in 21 to $2,000 in 24, and that's even with the increased referendum. Of course, the second example there is at 400. I do have a little higher values here. Here's the 460 on the left-hand side. You can see it going from 28 to 26. So I think that really shows what's happening with our tax. But of course, they don't stay the same, right? So if we go here and look at that, have an average 38.5 change in the property value, of course, we have people over 38, and we have people under, so it's all over the board. But just as a picture, snapshot in time. Here's it now. Because of the increased value in that house, it started at $252,000 4 years ago. Now it's up to almost $2,000 when we look at the value up to $350,000. We go to here the 460 residential homestead property. So, and this might be a little closer to what's happening with some of the taxpayers in our district, as we're seeing those values of houses increase. But it just gives you a snapshot. Another thing I want to touch base on very briefly, state property tax refunds and deferrals. Again, homestead credit refund is available. Of course, it's based on your income, but the maximum refund is up to $3,140 for homeowners and $2,440 for renters. There is a special property tax refund for years that you see big increases in your tax. So if your increase is at least 6% or over $100, your refund, you can get up to 60% of that back with a max of $2,500. So I want everyone to be aware of that if you're seeing some big increases in your taxes. I listed this senior citizen property tax deferral. I've been asked about this with different people over the years. There is a program, if you're on a fixed income, you're over 65 years old, and you make less than $96,000, you can actually defer some of your taxes. So you can budget, you know what your taxes are going to be every year. Of course, the downside of this is when that house is sold in the future, those deferred taxes have to be paid along with some interest on them. So I just want people to be aware of them.
Director Carly Anderson.
I know one of the concerns people have is people who've been in their homes for a long time. And I talked to some of these people in downtown Lakeville who've been there forever, and all this growth is happening, and all of a sudden their property taxes are increasing. Maybe their home is worth more money, but they're not seeing that while they're sitting in their house and not wanting to sell. And so this is the squeeze that happens, right, where people are having to pay more in property taxes, and they're not. So you're saying for those people who are over 65 and in those kinds of situations, they could defer, and then if they ever do sell, then they
have to pay it back. Yeah. So that's an option for people. You have to talk to the county. I don't know what the interest rate or anything that they would charge on those deferred taxes, but that is an option for them not to see their taxes go up.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize, I think we all talk about the value of living in our communities is growing and watching your property value increase, but for people who then can't afford the taxes associated with that, I think that's a big concern.
Any other comments or questions from the board?
Okay, as part of the hearing, of course, we need to take time and accept comments from the community that's here. So we'll take time and do that. So I think there's a process that you put together for that. Okay.
We will now invite the public to participate in the public comment portion of our Truth and Taxation meeting. This is the time for the public to comment and ask questions regarding the proposed property tax levy and budget. Each individual will be provided 3 minutes to speak. The board chair will alert the speaker when 30 seconds is remaining. Please keep all comments respectful and related to the topic of the tax levy and budget. Our first speaker is Ben Pierce. If you could time, that'd be great. So Ben will have 3 minutes, and then we'll give you a thumbs up when it's 30 seconds left.
So I got a few questions for the board about the proposed budget. So one of the questions I'd asked at a prior meeting is I was wondering if the school district's getting the best yield on its cash investments. For example, are we using money market funds? Are we going to places that offer the lowest expense ratios or fees on money market funds, like, say, Vanguard, that retail investors might use? I'm also wondering, one of the agenda items was talking about naming rights for the hockey arena. I'm wondering if the district has ever considered doing an open public option for naming rights to buildings like schools, because that might be a way to generate some revenue without having to go to the state, going to taxpayers and just increasing property taxes. The other thing I'm wondering about is the gymnasiums that are at the schools, because, wintertime, it's hard to go outside for a long time. Sometimes parents will pay to go to indoor playgrounds, private ones. I'm wondering if the district already or has ever considered maybe charging, some sort of admission or maybe a membership fee so parents can use the gymnasiums during winter as a way to raise some revenue. The other thing I'm wondering about is one of the slides was assuming that there's really only two options. It's either raise taxes or cut services that the district offers. I'm wondering if the district has looked at ways to stretch things, because on the property tax referendum questions, they were saying that if those measures weren't passed by the public, that the district would have to deal with large student-to-teacher ratios. I don't think a large student-to-teacher ratio is necessarily a bad thing. For example, if we were doing something like flipping the classroom, which they've done at some districts in Bay Area, California, what they would do is the math teacher, instead of having to stand up at the board, lecture to 40 students at a time, they could use something like Khan Academy. They can track all their students' progress, and they can see which students need to be taken aside and, 2 or 3 at a time help them review a topic like mixed fractions to improper fractions, et cetera. And then this way, everybody can kind of go at their own pace. Now, it's not everybody has to go at the same time, but this way you can stretch how much work your math teachers can do without overburdening them, because from what I see, it seems like a lot of school districts have the most trouble with hiring special ed teachers and math teachers. So if we're having, I don't know if that's true for Lakeville, but if we are having trouble hiring math teachers, if we did an approach like this, then that might be a way to stretch the budget a little bit. Just like to hear from the board about that and maybe some of the district administration. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Lisa Miller. Oh, sorry, there's no R.
Right, I'm one of those people whose taxes went up 154%. After many, many years of saving money, finally get my dream to build a house. And now I'm pretty much house poor. So I'm looking at the levies. I mean, I've had all my taxes for the last 5 years. It took me 4 years before I could finally build. And within those 4 years, my price of my land is suddenly up $100,000. The house is worth $391, but I live on acreage. Then I look at these voter-approved levies and other levies, and I'm paying just over $4,000 per year. I don't have kids in the Lakeville. I had kids in Apple Valley, which I moved from, and they went through levies, and it's like we won't have another levy for another 10 years. And it's like, it looks like we had a levy. It just seems like, when does this stop? And like this gentleman was saying, when do we start looking at, like, in my house, it's like, well, I can't have cable, I'm single, I can't, there's many things that I can't do. I have to budget because I've got high electricity, I got high gas. My house insurance went up so much. And then the inflation, I won't even drive anywhere. I do my grocery shopping maybe every 2 weeks, just so I can try to budget and afford for everything. So I'm just wondering, kind of like, just like that gentleman was saying, are we looking for ways so we don't have to take more money from property owners? And the other thing too is, in my area, many of the parents are very disappointed with the school systems. So they're putting their kids in Catholic schools, or they're pulling them out and doing homeschooling. And I know several students who are close to, they'll be out of the public school system in a year or so, but they're failing. They're not learning anything. And a lot of things that they're learning are not even the basics that they can even get a job. So I don't even know how they're gonna.
You have 30 seconds remaining.
Okay, that's pretty much, let me see if I had any other things. Let's see. You guys had an elementary school that you shut down about 5 years ago off of Ipava and turned it into, I don't know, whatever you turned it into. And now that I'm seeing that now you want to build a brand new school, can you go back and maybe take that school back and use that instead of building a brand new? There's just many options. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for sharing.
Yep.
Bob Erickson? Thank you.
Good evening, Chair Baker, board members, Superintendent Van Zyl. I'm Bob Erickson, 19081 Indale Drive. I'm here this evening just to make a couple of observations. I've stayed connected with many of my former members of the Finance Advisory Council that served at the end of 22 and the beginning of 23. We've stayed connected and we've monitored the activities of the board, and specifically the finances. These are the questions that have surfaced from them and myself and from contacts that people have made with me. First question was, does the levy for taxes payable 24 serve what fiscal year? What's the fiscal year that these dollars serve? Another question, the most often asked question, I'm sure you're not surprised by this, but on the property tax statement, there's been a dramatic change in the voter-approved levy versus the other levy. So when we contacted Dakota County, they indicated that taxpayers, and I'm reading from the memo that I received from the Finance Department, taxpayers in School District 194 are seeing a tax reduction on voter-approved levies since the board approved a levy renewal absent a vote of the people. And so the change on the document, the change that we all received, we all saw a dramatic change between voter-approved and other levies, was that the board used the opportunity that the legislature gave you, and you approved, almost all of you, 2 of you did not, approved the renewal of that levy. So that changed, dramatically changed the form and the reporting that taxpayers have received and have generated numerous questions. I most often asked question. One thing that we learned as a Finance Advisory Committee member or members, of which there were about 24 residents that gave of their time and talent, we learned that from the district administration that ISD 194 has one of the top employee health insurance plans of any school district in Minnesota. And that's a good thing in the context that it attracts and retains our quality staff. On the flip side of that, I'd be curious, under the benefits that were represented tonight in Mr. Holmberg's presentation, I'd be curious what the most recent increase in health insurance premium costs have been for 1 year for our employees. I think that's significant, considering the combination of our benefits and our compensation nearly represent 80% of our budget, 80% of our operating budget.
That's your 3
out of
minutes.
time?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, I didn't know we were limited on the state law to 3 minutes, but I'll follow the rules. Thank you.
Thank you. Were there any other community members that would wish to address the board based on the tax levy? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to the next portion of our meeting, which is to certify the Pay 24 tax levy.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, what I need with the board, what I need is to go ahead and certify the levy. The total amount of the levy for Pay 24 would be $78,285,071.
Do I have a motion from a board member to approve the pay 24 tax levy?
I'll make a motion.
We have a motion by Director Kelleher. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Director Carly Anderson. Is there any further discussion on this by the board? Director Thompson?
Yeah, I've got a question. Can you clarify pay 24? What fiscal year does this impact?
This is fiscal 25.
So
So
what
these
is-
dollars are available to us next July.
So next July, so 2024 through end of June of 2025.
Correct.
Okay.
Director Thompson?
And so the levies that are being proposed, there really isn't a whole lot of option, correct? I mean, these are automatic, they're increased, they are updated by inflationary components that are part of the levy that was passed. So does the, like, is that my understanding?
Well, these are this is the maximum levy that we can do. The board has the option to, under levy. The problem with under levy, then we also lose aid on the other side, which is a lot more than the under levying that you would have done. At the same time, if we don't bring these funds in, we'd be right back here in a couple of months making cuts for next year because we won't have enough funds for the staff we have on hand.
All right.
Do you have any further questions, Director Thompson?
Yeah, I guess I'd like to, if you can show your screen that you had earlier that kind of had the financial projections. I just want to be mindful that we're understanding this decision as well as where the money is going to go you've got a slide that's called District Revenues and Expenditures fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 24.
Back to the budget?
It might be like your first 7 slides-ish or so. Yeah, so I'm looking at this, and I just want to make sure I understand this. So, last year, the state of Minnesota, along with all of our property taxes, we brought in $184 million in revenue, and we spent about almost 191.8. So let's just say $192 million, right? And so we did a $7 million budget exercise in April that was very challenging, and so without that $7 million budget exercise, can I make the assumption that our expenditures for this 23 year would have been $201 million?
That is correct.
Okay, so with that reduction, in addition to new students that we were projecting to come in and additional staff that we may or may not have hired and so forth, our expenditures for this year is $194.5. So the delta between last year and this year is that we are increasing our expenditures by about $2.5 million. Just want to make sure I understand that.
Yeah, that's the budget at this time, yes.
Okay. And so from a revenue point of view, last year we received $184 million, and through the state, because of the 4% increase, and other miscellaneous components, we're super fortunate to be able to bring in $196 million in revenue, and so if not for probably the changes that the state has made, we may not be in a very favorable position today, knowing that our expenditures are roughly $194 million. So there's a big difference that the state contributed to help close that gap that probably would have. And if they didn't, that probably would have warranted much larger of a budget cut back in April. Is that my understanding?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And so part of the 196. So the 196 million is for this year. And so do we have projections of what we're expecting for revenues for next year? Because this pay 24 is only going to be a component of that fiscal year 24-25 revenue. Correct? Okay. And so the ask here is to approve $78 million in levies.
Yes.
For next year.
Correct.
Okay. So, sorry about that.
That's right. No, we appreciate the clarification on that. Thank you. Do we have any further questions from board members? Okay, so we have a motion on the floor and a second. Hearing no other questions, we'll go ahead and put it to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. All Our next report is the resolution combining polling locations.
So we visited a little bit about this during the work session. And hopefully everybody remembers we are only having one meeting this month, so your work session was prior to your regular board meeting. Otherwise, you would have had some additional time. So this is something that you have the ability to take a look at. If you choose to do so, you can. If you choose not to, it stays the same way as what it is, but we felt like due diligence, we need to be able to show you where we're at and the opportunities that you have as far as what you can do to combine from 20 polling locations down to 9. I think Kim did a nice job of explaining the information that she provided with you with a map and some other things that were there. So she, of course, went through that process the first time this year, worked with Deanna, who's done it before in the past, and Deanna would tell you she has the same recommendation, I think, presented that to the board. So really, administratively, we believe this is a good thing to be able to do, but if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. It really boils down to you as a board, what you feel most comfortable with. If it doesn't take place, it can be revisited again next year, but you have to realize, again, I think as we shared during the work session, this is only for board school district elections. It has no impact on any other election. It's only school district elections that this would be impacting. So with that, I know you had some information to take a look at. You had some questions. If you have any other questions, we'll do our best to answer them.
Do we have any questions from the board on this? Sorry, go ahead.
If it's something that you don't want to do, you could do two things. You could either choose to table it and not take action on it, or you could make a recommendation up or down. I would tell you it probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense to vote it down. If you don't want to do it, I would just recommend you table it rather than make a vote on something if you don't feel comfortable doing it. So that'd be my 2 cents as far as how you want to address it. You could either vote to approve it, or you could vote to say, hey, we're not ready to take action, and then you can just table it and we can bring it back to you next year. But remember that it won't take effect until the following year if you choose to do something differently.
Director Carly Anderson.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I just tried to voice during our discussion about this is I don't anticipate, and maybe I'm totally wrong, but I don't anticipate doing a school-specific election next year. And so just given we haven't really had a ton of board discussion on this and haven't received any community input, I would vote to table it, or encourage us to table it and bring it up. I would make a motion to table it.
I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion on the table to table this discussion and a second. The motion was made by Director Carly Anderson and the second was by Director David Anderson. Do we have any further discussion on this item? Director Kelleher?
So I appreciate, Kim, all the work that you've done with this. I think it is valuable, and I agree that there's nothing in this next year that we've been discussing or talking about that warrants needing to do this. But I do think it's something worth understanding and considering for in the future, for the time and the dollars that it will save our district. So again, thank you, Kim, for doing that. And it's necessary to discuss it now because it's required by law to have it voted on by December 31st each year. So that's why it's being discussed today. So we'll just revisit it next year, table it until December of next year.
Any other? Director Thompson?
Yeah, I guess I'd be in favor of tabling as well, so that we can provide an avenue just in case. Again, just to clarify, this is an ask to reduce the 20 polling locations down to 9 locations for the community members to vote. And so you've got folks that would have to find their location, go to a different place, and so obviously there may be some negative consequences for folks trying to figure out where they need to vote, but also some positive benefits for centralizing and minimizing the number of locations out there. I did hear earlier today that about the cost to run an election. An election in November-ish or so is roughly about $80,000, and so the cost savings of reducing it down from 20 locations down to 9 was about a 20 to 30% savings. So you're looking at about a $20,000 to $30,000 savings. But when we're going out there and levying $1.5 million or $3.5 million, the $20-30 million, while it is a large amount, we we need to make sure that folks have the right access to go and know where they go to vote. So the cost savings of $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 in my mind, it doesn't justify reducing it down to 9. But I'm open to tabling this for another discussion.
Dr. Van Zyl.
Just want to remind people, you still need to take a look at where you vote. Just because you voted one place this year doesn't mean you'll vote in the same place next year. So I don't want people to get confused. By not doing this doesn't mean that where they vote is going to consistently be the same. The city has the ability to make those adjustments as well. So I just wanted, if people are listening and wondering about that, they need to be mindful of that process as well. So be educated, go to the places, find where you can do that. That is what I would just remind people to do.
Director Thompson.
And one more clarification. This is for when the school district has something that they want to bring out to vote. And so if the city doesn't have anything, if this isn't a general election, this isn't a representative or any other election, this is when we need to have something that we want to go vote on. The ask or the proposal is to reduce the 20 polling locations down to 9. Okay.
Any other discussion on this item? Okay, so we have a motion and a second to table this item until next year. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right, so we're at the superintendent's report.
I'll be very quick. Just a reminder that we are approaching the end of the calendar year with holiday break, Christmas break, holidays that people are celebrating coming up here shortly. Again, a reminder that this is only a meeting of the board this month for folks to be able to take a look at. I would encourage people to stay tuned to emails and to the website in regard to the upcoming boundary conversations that will be taking place. So even though the holiday season is upon us, very quickly we'll be in the new year, and that will be a conversation that's up front. I would also like to remind people, parents, students, everyone, that attendance is still vitally important. We still have a lot of folks that are if they're sick, stay home, get that. It's that time of the year when those things are happening, but I think it helps our staff be able to educate our students when they're there in the classrooms and not having to take some additional time to catch them up. So if people can remember to do that, showing up is vitally important. Even though it doesn't look like it, I would also encourage people to stay informed about snow day updates. Right now, we're fortunate that looks like we're hopefully going to make it through the break without having that, but you never know what could happen between now and the beginning of next calendar year, and the first day of school could have a snow day, second day, third day, because Minnesota winters are wonderful. So make sure that you stay informed about that, and we'll make sure we send that information out. Hopefully everybody enjoys their holidays, and I encourage people to stay healthy and have a great time with their family. So that's all I have this evening.
Thank you. Having completed all the items on the agenda, do I have a motion for adjournment?
I motion.
We have a motion by Director Schindley. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Director Lind. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.